It's funny looking at photos of Motorhead at the absolute heyday, 1981 or very, very early 80s, but especially the photos on like No Sleep Till Hammersmith, where, just banks of marshals, huge crowds, classic Lemmy, and, Fast Eddie got his thing with the sort of, well, not on stage, but he used to wear, well, sometimes he did, like wear that hat, sort of slightly like a witch's hat, um, buttoned up black shirt, the sort of the boots and all that. Anyway, the image of Motor, classic image, the men in black, double bass kit. Anyway, I could go on, the lights, the bomber rig, blah, 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 blah. But to look at that, all of that, and then think of how they started, Motorhead started. I mean, that was a band that just started literally from scratch. I mean, Lemmy being booted out of Hawkwind, but he had that name, he'd had success in Hawkwind. And arguably even before that, like the Rocking Vickers and stuff. I mean, Fast Eddie actually, one thing that's not often mentioned is Fast Eddie had met Lemmy, I think in the late 60s. He was at a party and Lemmy was playing the acoustic guitar. He said he remembered because Lemmy was something of a face, as Fast Eddie referred to it. So he'd actually seen Lemmy, and then, Lemmy got the band together after being chucked out of Hawkwind. And then they had that sort of weird honeymoon period where they played like, was it Hammersmith? They supported Blue Oyster Cult pretty much almost straight off the bat, or not long after we formed the band, purely on the strength of Lemmy's name. But then, of course, that went to SHIT, and that's when they really had to start from scratch with Fast Eddie and Filthy Phil in the band now, after Larry Wallace and Lucas Fox. And there's a photo of them, I really like it's 75, and they're playing a venue called the Toby Jug, which it's been knocked down now, but it was a pub, and it was a live venue near where I live in southwest London. I don't know what it was like back in the day, back in those days. Obviously, I was too young, but they seem to have some big acts on, David Bowie and stuff. It was definitely a venue, but by the time I knew of it, until it got knocked down, it was a place just not to go. If you walked in there, everyone stopped talking and stared at you, and the regulars there were basically kind of men who liked a fight. So yeah, I think I went there once, and it was the most quickest pint I've ever had. Anyway, that by the by. But there's a photo of Motorhead playing in this place, Toby Jug, and they've got like one battered old high watt that's been placed on a bar stool. Fast Eddie Clark, I don't know why I think this exactly, but he looks like something out of Ugly Kid Joe, or a grunge band. I think, some band in like the early 90s, early 1990s. He looks like really young, like he's 15. Fast Eddie. He's got his long hair. It's just like that. He's got like a t-shirt, but the t-shirt with like a long t-shirt underneath it. It looks really strange, given that would have been like 75, almost certainly 75. I think it is. The image he had was like, yeah, like a sort of skate grunge kid from like the early 90s. Really odd. And Phil Animal Tails just playing a single bass drum kit. And I checked it, that thing, it was like, there was only 5 songs listed. I thought that was a short set. And then I later found out, because I'm a nerd and anorak, and I check these things out, Lemmy had laryngitis that night, and he couldn't sing any longer than that, so they had to stop short. And then just recently I've read, their early days, and of course they were skint starving, living in bed-sits. I said before, Lemmy's meal was invariably going to someone's house and hopefully had a bit of fat left in the pan. He'd run some bread around the pan. And I've said all this, but yeah, they're just so on their uppers. And I read another thing where they were going to a gig, and they had this battered old van, and one of their mates drove it. They're going to a gig somewhere. It's quite a bit of a drive from where they were all kipping. And apparently Lemmy got in the van, and he was all muffled up, and he had toothache, and he was all hunched up like that, and he had there's like this shroud around his head. And they were driving to the van broke down, and then they tried to jack it up. I think I said, he's been that band managed by Fast Eddie Clark, and one story he told the other lads from the band, I never heard it directly, was Lemmy was trying to fix this fan, like the jack up, and the jack broke. I mean, fucking could have been, I could have killed him. I don't know how it worked. But apparently the jack broke or something, and the van came down. But either way, I think it matches up with this story. So Lemmy had two friends, and the van broke, and they're trying to fix his van. They got it going, and for some reason, Filthy Animal Taylor got in a state about something, got uptight, and he kicked the side of this van, and he fractured his foot or broke some toes or something, and then said, not surprisingly, I can't do the gig. Somehow they did the gig. Yeah. Anyway, all these stories, but they were just absolutely, from such unpromising beginnings to ultimately get to where they got to, with like No Sleep Till Hammersmith, Motörhead's #1 album. With the bomber hanging above them, banks of Marshalls, huge lights, all that sort of thing. It's just incredible. There was a story. Lemmy said one time they got to Hammersmith, first gig at Hammersmith, and they looked at each other and said, "Yes, we made it." I mean, it's a nice story, but I don't know whether by then I doubt they were taking much in. They'd just been working the road for so long. I mean, they were knackered. They were sick of each other. They'd all had one thing about the volume of Motörhead's concerts, of course. And one thing they'd all had perforated eardrums. I mean, Filthy Animal Taylor said it used to drive him mental trying to sleep at night, this whistling and howling in his ears, and like perforated eardrums and stuff. And showing hotels, and apparently Lemmy's foot hygiene left something to be desired, and he was fond of breaking wind stuff. So that's Filthy Animal Taylor and Fast Eddie Clark having massive fist fights and stuff. So I mean, they'd all grown to just kind of loathe each other on the road. But they'd done this album, like Lemmy said, he was in New York, because by the time Motörhead were really blowing up huge in England and like most of Europe, they were slogging the road on the States. I think they're supporting Ozzy Osbourne, playing to at best indifferent audiences. At worst, they were getting catcalled and actually booed. I mean, no one really knew what to make of them. So he was in bed. He said he was in bed in New York, probably been awake for 3 days and all this sort of thing. So he's sleeping, and a call come through. So he picked up the phone, and this voice said, your live album, No Sleep Till Hammersmith, has just gone to #1 in England." And Lemmy said, "I'll just call me back later." Hung up the phone, and then he was like, "Shit, bang!" He was awake. So while they'd just gone massive in England, they were slogging the road in the States, and it's just a combination of 5-6 years of just continual touring from such dive bars like I said, the Ethel previously mentioned Toby Jug to Hammersmith. It was like a fairy story, but a fairy story with a lot of dirt, grime, blood, sweat, and tears in it. Whenever I've seen this several times, people say, they talk Hammersmith and they say that where Motörhead's legendary live album was recorded. Well, the clue is in the title, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. Apparently, the road crew of Motörhead, they painted this on the trucks, but then I've also heard the story for I've also heard the story for the slogan "Everything Louder Than Everything Else." Apparently, No Sleep Till Hammersmith was painted on the trucks because of this lunatic live schedule that Motörhead were doing. I mean, for the bomber tour, they did 52 gigs in 54 days. How did they do it? But like, just for Lemmy, how the hell did he keep that voice? And there's that famous story that he'd lost his voice completely, and someone said to him, if you hook up, get a tractor battery, and you put a few clips on you, like wires leading off from this battery, and put them on specific sites of your body, you get your voice back. And in desperation, him and Biff Byford from Saxon, who was supporting Motörhead, Biff Byford also lost his voice, but he said, "Yeah, fuck that, I'm not doing that." Lemmy probably took a shot of vodka and said, "Yeah, go on then." Hooked up, he said he got his voice back in 5 minutes. It was fine. So they had they resorted to desperate measures to keep up that schedule, and of course the road crew having to put up this thing every night and take it down, unless they played like Hammersmith. They played the same venue for 2 or 3 nights. I guess they could leave it in place, but I mean, they've got the bomber rig and all of that. So Eddie said that he would have put their road crew up against any other road crew for any other band in the world. He said they were fantastic. I've seen a very brief video clip of them from like that period, the early 80s. I've never found it again. there's guys coming down on like, they're like abseiling down, putting lights up and doing the bomber thing and stuff. It looked like a military effort, like, you know, like special forces or something. So anyway, they had like no steel to Hammersmith, the road crew. They were just the same tunnel vision as the band. Well, it was the band and then the crew. It was all kind of part of the same thing, really. They were just going to see it right through to the end. So no steel to Hammersmith. So yeah, no steel to Hammersmith. So none of the album was recorded at Hammersmith. What we got here, the places, well, Restaurant and Queen's Hall, Leeds, Newcastle. So all the gigs in England apart from one in Belfast, Northern Ireland. What we've got track-wise. So opens up, yeah, I love the way Motörhead could open up a set of Ace of Spades. That was so cool. Like their best known hit is just like, they actually was like, let's get out of the fucking way. Yeah. So they claim Metropolis, the Hammer, Iron Horse. Now Iron Horse, Born to Lose, such a thrilling version. That when he repeats the chorus at the end 3 times, you know, hairs on the back of the spine go up. You know, it's magic. It's one of the most powerful moments I know in rock, in heavy rock or live. You know, Iron Horse, this is live. Iron Horse, this is live. And but apparently doing that, they had to start that actual recording. They cut off a bit at the beginning. Phil Fenimore Taylor tries to start it, and twice he can't get the drum. He can't get the drum intro. So they still you know, still a few teething problems or something. I don't know, is that? But I was thinking, you know, Motörhead, even stuff like that would have been, you know, great fun. It was all part of the crack, you know. But once they got going, no class, Overkill, man, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of these songs, thanks to No Sleep, Hammersmith. So when I first got to Motörhead, it's because my mate almost forced me to listen to No Remorse. So hearing these tracks live, like Overkill, so much. Well, Motörhead was a live band, wasn't it? And like Capricorn, it's just a bit dull and wishy-washy for me on the Overkill album, and then Capricorn really comes to life live, so crunching, and that evil bass riff at the end. Capricorn. In fact, I have my bass here. That is so, it's excellent. Bomber. And then yeah, Motörhead, which was a single. Just awesome song. Play that one at my funeral. I just love, that's one got to be in my top 10 of favourite tracks, alive, Motörhead. And they released that at the single. I mean, that got to number 6. So it was quite incredible. This is England, in England, of course, the chart ratings. And you know, for anyone who, I mean, I grew up at that time. I can vaguely remember as a kid. I've been 5 or 6. You know, you watch TV and there'd be like these frightening men. It'd show a briefest clip of some otherworldly racket, but it was like Motörhead had become like an institution. They were figures on TV. They were proper celebrities. Even if you hated the music, you'd turn on TV and there'd be Filthy Phil and Eddie like whacking custard pies into each other's faces on children's TV, and then probably once the camera was off, you know, battering the hell out of each other with, you know, their fists. But they were proper celebrities. And another thing, like going to a Motörhead gig was like, even if you weren't into the band, it was like, if you were young, it was like a rite of passage. Like you'd seen Motörhead and you'd experienced the volume and the sheer power. And I used to work in a guitar shop, and this old guy came in. Well, he was old to me then. He was probably only in his like late 30s. But I was like 19 or something. But he'd said he'd seen The Who in their heyday of Keith Moon, and he'd seen Motörhead, and he was like, you know, both best live bands in the world, but I'd say Motörhead just aced it. I mean, he'd seen Motörhead with Filthy Phil and Faster Than Clark. I mean, so we'd seen both those bands who are absolutely famous for their live shows in their heyday with their, you know, their classic lineups, as it were. He said Motörhead just aced it. But of course, as Lemmy so often said afterwards, Oh, that's what, just looking at on the Wikipedia thing here. I just do it to keep the basic facts going. It says Filthy Phil noticed this thing he had about Doug Smith, their manager. You know, he just absolutely hated till the day he died. Fast Eddie made it up with him. Fast Eddie thought he'd be, because they were always convinced they'd been ripped off. Seems to be arguments on both sides actually about that. But anyway, Filthy Phil was just hated Doug Smith till the day he died, and he said, you know, part of the reason they were just kept so busy touring all the time. He said if we were off the road, we might have started to think, and you know, think, oh, hang on, where's all the money going, and why we're having #1 records now, and we're still only getting 250 quid a week, you know, wages. Doug Smith would have said that, you know, well, like Fast Eddie Clarke was keeping a roadie on all the time, even when they're off the road, which actually can't have been that often. But one of Doug Smith's point was they were paying like their tech, just to sit when they were off the road, just to sit around and do nothing. And their live show took a load of money and stuff, which Lemmy conceded as well. Was it going? Yeah. So after all this slog, all the up and down on the motorways, the shitty vans, the crappy venues, the bad equipment, blah blah blah. Suddenly there's this beast. There's this classic Motörhead show. But as Lemmy said, once you've had a #1 album, where do you go? What do you do? That was, you know, it was Sean Motörhead hitting their peak, but Lemmy kind of said he knew that it was also their death knell. And also what with the other two, Filthy Phil and especially Fast Eddie, getting quite volatile. Eddie had a developing drink problem, which was making him quite emotionally highly strung and all this sort of thing. But then apparently, I'm sure Lemmy had his ways as well. But anyway, suffice to say, they're all distinctly starting to rub each other up the wrong way. Especially it gone into a camp of Lemmy and Filthy Phil and Eddie. And you know, this #1 album was as much as a curse as it was a blessing, because they were then suddenly under even more pressure now to try and follow it up. And as Lemmy says, you can't follow up a live album that's gone to #1. I mean, it's just not possible. So they were kind of doomed. And that's they kind of tasted the fruits of their success, as it were. But it was I'm trying to think how do I finish this one? Not gonna have the best aftertaste or something. God, that's lame. Yeah. Anyway, it was an absolute success at #1, but also basically the death knell, or it rang the death knell for the classic lineup.